Welcome back, Soul Stories fam. This is part two of the story, She Ran from Her Wedding, only to fall into the arms of a billionaire stranger. If you haven't listened to part one yet, please check it out first so you can enjoy the full journey. Now let's dive right into the next chapter. Clara dragged her old suitcase, her rain-soaked shoes squeaking on the wet street. After the night she left Alexander, she felt like a leaf drifting without direction. His cold voice kept echoing in her head. You have to leave this place. She had thought of returning to her parents' house, at least to find temporary shelter, but a heavy unease weighed her down. How would they look at her? A daughter who ran away on her wedding day, disgracing the entire family? She wasn't sure, but at least it was still home. Near the city center, Clara's legs ached, and she stopped under the awning of the Whitmore Plaza Hotel, a towering, luxurious glass building. From the side door came the sharp sound of leather shoes. Clara looked up, her heart jolting. Damien. He appeared in a dark suit, walking with authority, his face cold as if carved from stone. But what froze Clara was the man walking beside him. The faint scar on his temple, the mocking half-smile. Images from old newspapers came rushing back. Ryan. Clara's heart pounded so hard it hurt. He was alive, and standing right here. Clara hid behind a wall near the side hallway, her heart ready to burst from her chest. The two men stopped in a narrow courtyard where the yellow light spilled just enough for a discreet conversation to take place. Damien pulled out a lighter and lit a cigar, white smoke curling into the air. You're sure he's still alive? Ryan chuckled, his voice smooth as oil. The message I sent wasn't returned. He read it. Alexander Cole doesn't die that easily. I know him. Clara held her breath. Alexander. Damien narrowed his eyes. If that's true, then we both benefit. I want Clara Bennett back. Her family owes me too much. She will stand before the public, bow her head in apology, and become my wife. That way Whitmore's reputation remains untarnished, and the Bennett family is free from debt. Ryan let out a low laugh, his eyes sharp as blades. And I want Alexander to show his face. He can't abandon a woman. The moment news spreads that Clara's in danger, he'll come. And this time, I'll finish him for real. Damien exhaled smoke, lips curling into a smirk. You're certain? He survived the accident you staged before. This time cannot fail. Ryan leaned closer, whispering, I've prepared thoroughly. And you can rest assured, Clara will be the perfect bait. Clara felt her legs go weak and had to grip the wall to stay upright. The words she just heard stabbed into her heart like knives. Damien never cared about her. He only wanted to use her as a tool to patch up his honor in business. And Ryan, he wanted to kill Alexander. But it didn't stop there. Damien continued, his voice ice cold. The Bennett family has already agreed. They know they have no choice but to cooperate. When I bring Clara back, they'll hold a press conference and publicly admit their fault. She has no say in the matter. Ryan sneered. That makes things easy. With her family surrendering, all I need to do is drag Alexander out of hiding. Clara trembled. Her parents, complicit? They were willing to throw her into the fire just to save the company? She had hoped returning home meant protection, but in truth, home was nothing but a new trap. The two men turned and walked away, the sound of their footsteps fading. Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding as if it would tear her chest open. A drizzle fell, but she didn't feel the cold, only the rush of hot blood coursing through her. Number. She would not go back. She would no longer bow to Damien, nor be Ryan's pawn, nor let her family trade her for money. In her mind, Alexander's face appeared, his deep eyes filled with pain and resolve. He had once stood at the door, alone against those who came to take her. He had once whispered, I won't lose you again. She shivered and whispered, Alexander, you don't know they're working together. If I stay silent, you'll die. Clara clenched her fists. A fiery determination rose within her, stronger than fear. For the first time in her life, she saw clearly the path she had to take. She stepped out from the hotel awning, her soaked shoes splashing through puddles, leaving shaky but resolute footprints. The night was freezing. The wind stung her eyes, but inside her, a flame burned steadily. She was no longer the weak Clara controlled by her parents, manipulated by Damien. She was no bargaining chip. She would return to Alexander, not to hide behind him, but to fight beside him. That night beneath the grim sky, Clara walked on, each step pulling her toward destiny. And in her heart, she whispered like a vow, if Alexander must face the past, then I will face it with him. I would rather die than abandon him again. Clara knew well she couldn't return to her parents' house. But before she could find her way to Alexander, everything spun out of control. On a narrow road near town, just as she stepped out of the grocery store, a black van screeched to a halt beside her. Before she could cry out, a rough hand clamped tightly over her mouth and yanked her inside. The door slammed shut. The outside world vanished, leaving only suffocating darkness and the roar of the engine. Clara struggled, but the ropes dug into her wrists. A man's voice hissed in her ear. "Easy now, princess. You're just the bait." The van drove for hours before finally delivering Clara to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts. The stench of rust and machine oil filled her nose. Dim light bulbs cast a weak glow on the cold concrete floor. Ryan emerged from the shadows, walking slowly, his smile cold as ice. "We meet again, Clara Bennett," he sneered. "Sorry for the inconvenience, but you know, your precious Alexander only needs one reason to show his face, and you are that reason." Clara glared at him, her voice trembling. "You won't succeed. Alexander won't fall for your trap." Ryan laughed, the sound echoing across the warehouse. "Oh, how naive you are. You know the kind of man Alexander Cole is. He once sacrificed his career to save someone else. Now that you're in my hands, he can't sit still." Clara bit her lip, her heart swelling with unspeakable dread. Yes, Alexander would come, and this time he would have to face the enemy who wanted him dead. Night fell, and the warehouse sank into silence, broken only by the whistling wind through the cracks in the steel doors. Clara sat tied to an old chair, her eyes darting around, desperate for hope. A sound came from the roof, then a shadow dropped down, landing as silently as a hunting cat. "Let her go." That deep, hoarse voice made Clara shiver. She looked up, and her heart erupted. Alexander. He stepped out of the darkness, no longer the quiet recluse in a wooden cabin. A long black coat hung from his shoulders, his eyes sharp, his face resolute. He stood like a man who once commanded empires and made the financial world bow. Ryan clapped slowly. "So you finally showed yourself. Welcome back, Alexander Cole. I've waited far too long for this day." Alexander's gaze never left Clara. "Let her go, Ryan." "It ends here." Ryan smirked. "Still the same fool. Do you think I went through all this just to talk?" "No, I want to end this game. Last time you escaped death. This time I'll make sure." Ryan's men poured in, surrounding Alexander. But his eyes didn't waver, his voice low and cold. "If anyone lays a hand on her, I swear none of you will leave alive." Clara trembled, her heart racing. She could see the change. This was no longer the man hiding from the world in a cabin, but the CEO whose name once shook the globe. "Alexander," she whispered, choked with emotion. His eyes softened, strangely tender in the storm. "I'd rather expose myself than lose you." The words struck like a vow. Clara's tears spilled, vanishing into the darkness. Ryan signaled, and his men charged. Alexander moved like lightning, a clean punch dropping one instantly, his strikes precise, the movements of a man once rigorously trained. Bodies hit the concrete with resounding thuds. Clara shook with both fear and awe. He wasn't just a businessman broken by failure. He was someone who had walked through hell and come back alive. Ryan pulled a knife, steel glinting. "This time I'll finish you myself." Alexander stood firm in front of Clara, eyes icy. "Try it if you dare." The two men collided, the knife flashing in the air. The clash reverberated through the warehouse like thunder in a storm. Clara screamed, "Watch out!" Alexander dodged the blade, striking back with a punch that sent Ryan stumbling. But the man sneered, wiping blood from his lip. "You may win a few blows, but you can't keep her safe forever." "As long as I'm alive, Clara will never be safe," Alexander growled. "Then I'll make sure you never get the chance." With a final, powerful move, Alexander knocked the knife from Ryan's hand. Ryan staggered, his men panicking before dragging him off into the shadows, their footsteps fading in haste. Clara gasped for breath, tears streaming as Alexander knelt and freed her from the ropes. Her wrists burned, but her heart blazed with fire. He touched her face gently, his voice trembling yet firm. "I'd rather let the world know I'm alive than watch you disappear." Clara broke down, collapsing into his arms. Outside, the wind howled, the steel doors screeched, as if announcing the storm had only just begun. But in Alexander's embrace, she knew she had found the only place she was safe. News spread like wildfire. Alexander Cole was alive. Within a single night, blurry photos of him taken at the abandoned warehouse flooded online news sites. Public opinion exploded. The man once hailed as Wall Street's young legend, who vanished after a corruption scandal and a tragic accident, had returned. Inside the gleaming glass tower of Cole Enterprises, the company he once led, the air was suffocatingly heavy. The board of directors convened an emergency meeting. Powerful figures sat around the long table, their eyes filled with unease and suspicion. The door opened. Alexander entered. He was no longer the reclusive man in a plain shirt with weary eyes. Today he wore a perfectly tailored black suit, a silver-gray tie, and walked with steady confidence. Every gaze in the room snapped toward him, some skeptical, some astonished, and more than a few fearful. The chairman, an old man with silver hair, rasped, "Alexander Cole, we thought you were dead." Alexander placed a thick stack of files on the table, his calm gaze sweeping across each face. "I'm alive, and I've returned, not to defend myself, but to reveal the truth." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Ryan and Damien weren't present, but several shareholders allied with them frowned, whispering under their breath, "What is this?" He's lost all credibility. No one believes him anymore. Unfazed, Alexander opened the file, which was stamped with red seals on its pages. "Here's evidence you've never seen before. Falsified contracts, secret accounts, and testimony from a witness to the accident all point to one name, Ryan Morgan. And not just him. Damien Whitmore colluded, using his influence to cover it up in exchange for business favors." He pressed a button, and the massive screen behind him lit up. Images, leaked emails, and bank records filled the display. Numbers don't lie. Secret wire transfers, hand-signed deals, even an audio recording of Ryan admitting he staged the brake failure. The atmosphere grew thick. One board member slammed the table and stood. "Impossible! Ryan swore it was Alexander who betrayed us." Alexander's voice boomed. "I once believed he was my friend. But the truth is clear, he staged everything. And Damien Whitmore backed him, using Clara Bennett as a pawn to cover it all. This was their dirty alliance, and you were nothing but their chess pieces." The room erupted with whispers, some faces pale, others exchanging uneasy glances. A Whitmore ally growled, "Your words mean nothing. You disappeared, leaving the company to collapse. Why should we believe you now?" Alexander stepped forward and placed another envelope on the table. "This is the final proof. A technical inspection by the car manufacturer revealed that my brakes were deliberately cut. And here," he displayed an old camera recording, grainy but clear enough. A familiar figure loitered near the garage that day. "Ryan," the room exploded. Gasps, hurried breaths, the screech of chairs as people stood. The chairman slammed his gavel down. "Order!" Alexander's tone turned icy. "You don't have to believe me. Believe the facts. Ryan may have vanished from public view, but he and Damien are still manipulating events. If you stand by and do nothing, Cole Enterprises will become their prey." From the back of the hall, Clara's heart raced as she watched him. He was no longer avoiding the past, no longer hiding in the shadows. This was the Alexander the world once knew. Strong, sharp, unyielding. Alexander's gaze swept the room resolute. "I didn't return to beg. I returned to reclaim what was mine. My honor, the truth, and the position I built with sweat and blood. If any of you still want this company to survive, it's time to choose a side." Silence stretched. Then an elder board member slowly stood. "I once trusted Ryan, but after seeing this evidence, I can't turn a blind eye. I stand with Alexander Cole. Like dominoes, others began to nod, voices of support rising. The board shook with uproar, and in an instant, the balance of power shifted. Alexander clenched his fist, his eyes gleaming. He had reclaimed the most precious thing, his legendary standing. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Ryan and Damien would not sit idle. They would strike back at any cost. When the meeting ended, Clara approached, her eyes glistening with tears. "You've come back, truly." Alexander looked at her, exhaustion mingling with unshakable resolve. He whispered, "I couldn't keep running. Not when you've become the reason I stand again." Clara's hands trembled as she gripped his. In that moment, she knew she had chosen right, to stay by Alexander's side, to face the storm with him instead of running away. Outside, sunlight gleamed against the glass tower, reflecting the figure of a man risen from ashes. And once again, the name Alexander Cole thundered across the business world. The shock from the board meeting had barely settled when the business world erupted in new turmoil. The media overflowed with headlines about Alexander Cole's return. The man once branded a disgraced criminal, now hailed as the hero back from the dead. Cole Enterprises stock soared overnight, but in the shadows, two enemies sat face to face in the VIP room of an underground club. Ryan poured a drink, madness flickering in his eyes, while Damien leaned back in his chair, lips pressed tight with rage. "He's regained power," Damien growled. "The board has swung to his side. Everything we planned is falling apart." Ryan sipped his glass, smirking. "Don't worry. I've already prepared the next move. He's returned publicly, which means he's stepped right into the blade, and this time, I'll drive it deep." Damien narrowed his eyes. "What are you planning?" "Attack the weakness," Ryan said slowly, emphasizing each word. "Alexander always puts others before himself. Last time it was the company. This time, it's Clara Bennett." Her name hung in the heavy air. Damien let out a cold laugh, cigar smoke swirling like a ghost. "Perfect. She's both the key to her family's honor and his greatest vulnerability." 2 days later, social media exploded with a short video. In it, Clara wore a wedding dress, her face stricken with panic as she fled the altar. A bitter narration accompanied the footage. "This is runaway bride Clara Bennett, the woman who humiliated groom Damien Whitmore and both families before hundreds of guests. Now she's living with Alexander Cole, a man once accused of embezzlement. What is their relationship? Lovers on the run, or a staged act to cover up a corporate scheme?" The cruel comments poured in. "Typical bad girl, ditching her fiancé to run after a disgraced CEO. Alexander Cole may be back, but with a woman like that at his side, what's there to admire? Whitmore deserves to be the real winner." Clara sat in the living room, her hands trembling as she stared at the screen. Tears brimmed, her throat tightening. They've turned me into a joke." Alexander stood behind her, his eyes sharp as blades. He switched off the screen, his voice rough and steady. "This is psychological warfare. They're aiming at our weakness, trying to divide us. Clara, don't believe that trash." She looked up, tears streaking down her cheeks. "But I can't bear seeing you dragged through the mud with me. I'm a burden to you." Alexander stepped forward, gripping her shoulders firmly. "Listen to me. You're not a burden. The only reason they attack you is because they know you're my strength. I won't let them succeed." While public opinion seethed, Ryan launched his second strike. A shell company suddenly attacked Cole Enterprises with a flurry of cross-share trades, sending the market into chaos. The boardroom once again plunged into urgency. A shareholder cried out, "Our stock is in free fall. If we don't stabilize it, the trust we just regained will collapse." Alexander stood before a wall of charts, his eyes razor sharp. He recognized the move instantly. This is the same tactic Ryan used in the past, creating a false crisis to manipulate prices. But this time, he's impatient. We'll counter by buying back through support funds. When the price crashes, he'll choke on his own game. Some shareholders looked doubtful, but Alexander's voice was steady, commanding. And just as he predicted, 2 days later, Ryan's stock plummeted, costing him millions. From across the room, Clara watched, pride swelling in her chest. He wasn't just powerful with his fists. He was razor sharp in the corporate arena, the place that had once been his home. But Ryan wasn't finished. One late night, Clara found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a photograph. Alexander beside his wrecked car from years ago, bloodied and broken. Across it, scrawled in jagged letters, "This time, he won't escape. And you will be the reason he dies." Clara trembled, clutching the photo, tears streaming down her face. She knew the storm was far from over. When Alexander saw it, he remained silent for a long time. Then he ripped the picture in half, fury blazing in his eyes. "Ryan has crossed the line. He wants to break me at any cost. But he's forgotten one thing. I'm no longer alone." He turned to Clara, voice steady with resolve. "If they try to use you as my weakness, then together we'll turn it into our strength. I won't leave you, Clara, no matter how big the storm." Clara buried her head against his chest, her heart aching yet filled with trust. Somewhere in the city's darkness, Ryan and Damien smiled at their screens, convinced they had tightened the noose. But what they didn't know was that the pressure they created was only making Alexander more dangerous than ever. The night wind howled between the city's skyscrapers. Clara stood by the glass window, staring down at the dazzling lights, yet unease churned in her chest. Ever since Ryan and Damien launched their attacks, her life had spun into a whirlwind. Media slander, public ridicule, threats delivered straight to their door. Behind her, Alexander sat at his desk. A thick pile of files lay open, his laptop displaying financial analyses and chains of secret emails. His face was taut with tension, but his eyes gleamed with sharp focus. Clara turned, seeing the deep lines at the corners of his eyes, and her heart ached. "You've been awake for 3 nights straight," she whispered. Alexander looked up, his eyes softening at her worried gaze. "I don't have time, Clara. If this doesn't end soon, Ryan and Damien will keep striking. We need a move that will cut them off for good." Clara walked closer, laying a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone. Let me be part of this. I don't want to just sit and watch you carry it all." Alexander was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. In his eyes, a new kind of trust flickered. Trust in her. He spread out a business map on the desk. "Ryan and Damien are preparing to sign a massive deal with an international investment fund worth billions. If it goes through, they'll gain the leverage to rise above Cole Enterprises." Clara frowned. "If that deal succeeds, then we lose everything." Alexander cut in, his voice firm. "But I have evidence of their bribery and falsified profit reports used to lure the investors. The problem is, we must reveal it at the right moment, before the board and the international partners." Clara drew a deep breath. "Which means we need bait." Alexander looked straight at her, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, and unfortunately, the bait is you." Clara froze, but then pressed her lips together. Her heart trembled with fear, yet determination surged within. "If that's the only way to expose them, I accept. I'd rather face it than live in fear forever." Alexander gripped her hand tightly. "I swear, I won't let you be harmed. This time, we go in together." The next day, Clara appeared at the press conference Ryan and Damien had organized at the Whitmore Plaza Hotel. She wore a sleek navy blue dress, her hair tied neatly back, her face calm with an almost eerie composure. The press swarmed, cameras flashing nonstop. Damien stepped out, wearing a polite smile but with venom in his eyes. "Today we announce the return of runaway bride Clara Bennett. She will issue an apology and reconcile with the families, restoring their honor." The hall erupted in murmurs. Clara stepped onto the podium, the microphone trembling slightly in her hand. Ryan stood at a distance, his eyes sharp as blades, watching intently. Clara gave a faint, cold smile, her voice ringing clear. "Yes, I've returned, but not to apologize. I've returned to tell the truth." The hall fell into stunned silence. She continued, gaze firm. "Ryan Morgan and Damien Whitmore have built a filthy alliance. They wanted to use me as a tool, to turn me into bait, but I am no longer their pawn. Here," she raised a small USB stick. "Inside are all the proofs: falsified contracts, bribery, and stock manipulation. And now let Alexander Cole present the rest." The hall doors burst open. Alexander entered, commanding, his expression cold. Behind him came several international lawyers and representatives of the investment fund. The press exploded in a storm of flashing lights. "Apologies for the delay," his voice rang out, firm as steel. "But it's time the truth spoke." He plugged the USB into the screen. Images filled the display. Coded email exchanges between Ryan and Damien, fabricated figures, even a video of Ryan bribing an audit official. Damien's face turned ashen. Ryan's fists clenched, hatred burning in his eyes. The fund's representative shot up, voice thunderous. "This is fraud. We are canceling the contract immediately and reporting this to the Securities Commission." The hall erupted. Journalists surged forward, recording every word. Alexander's voice cut through the chaos, cold and sharp. "You used deceit to destroy me once, and now you tried to do the same to the market. But today you have no more chances." Clara stepped down, standing at his side, gripping his hand firmly before the wall of cameras. "We're not running anymore. This is our answer." Flashes lit up endlessly. The image of the two standing side by side became a symbol. The man who had fallen, now risen again, and the woman once seen as a pawn, now a witness to the truth. When the conference ended, Damien was dragged out, surrounded by reporters, his face dark and grim. Ryan slipped away in the chaos, but his final glare carried a clear promise. The game isn't over. In the car, Clara leaned against Alexander's shoulder, exhaling. "I was afraid, but I don't regret it." Alexander wrapped his arms around her, his eyes fixed on the glowing city outside. "You're not just my strength, Clara. You're the reason I'm still standing. And I swear this is only the beginning. They won't have a place left in this world." Outside, the city roared with noise, but inside the car, only two hearts beat in unison. The city glittered with lights like a galaxy spread across the ground. From the window of the high-rise apartment Alexander had rented after the press conference, Clara sat in silence, her eyes tracing the busy streets below. Down there, life carried on in a hurry, as if no one cared about the storm she and Alexander were facing. In that moment, she wished she were just an ordinary woman, able to hold his hand and stroll through the streets without fear or hiding. But reality was cruel. They were caught in a tightening vice of danger. Ryan had vanished, like a predator lurking in the dark. Damien was cornered by the media, yet there was no doubt he would strike back. The soft creak of the door broke her train of thought. Alexander stepped in, carrying 2 cups of hot cocoa. He set one before Clara, then sat down beside her. "I figured you needed something sweet after such a long day," he said, his deep voice carrying an uncharacteristic gentleness. Clara smiled faintly, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup. "So do you, Alexander. You've been carrying too much." He said nothing, only stared at the steam curling from his cup, then exhaled slowly. "Tomorrow might be the final battle. Ryan won't stay quiet after losing everything. I've prepared for the worst." Clara turned to face him. "You're always thinking of everyone else. But have you ever thought, if you fall, what will become of me?" Alexander froze. In the soft yellow light, Clara's eyes shone with both resolve and fear. "I've seen you fight. I've seen you rise from ashes. I'm proud of you. But Alexander, I don't need an invincible hero. I need a man who dares to stay, to live, to love me." He gazed at her for a long moment, his deep eyes wavering. Words caught in his throat, until finally he admitted, "I once lost everything, Clara, and I'm terrified of reliving it. But this time, if I have to lose, I'd rather lose everything out there than lose you." Clara's eyes filled with tears. His words shattered the cold wall he had built for years. She reached out, her small hand covering his. "Then let's move forward together. Don't push me away anymore." Alexander squeezed her hand, letting his heart tremble openly for the first time. Outside, the wind whistled through the cracks, but inside, the warmth of the fireplace and of the two of them spread. They sat close, saying little, letting their heartbeats align. Clara rested her head on his shoulder. "I've never felt so peaceful, even knowing tomorrow could bring the storm." He let out a rare, gentle smile. "That's exactly why I want to protect you. So you can feel peace, even if only for one night." They remained like that until the clock struck midnight. Alexander gently draped a blanket over Clara's shoulders as she drifted to sleep. He watched her serene face, his chest tightening with both love and fear. He whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, no matter what, I'll keep you safe." Once Clara was asleep, Alexander rose from the couch and walked to the desk. He opened his laptop and sent a final round of emails to his lawyers and loyal shareholders. Tomorrow's battle would not only be fought in the boardroom, but it could also spill into blood and violence. He knew Ryan would not stop at financial schemes. In his last email, he typed a single line: "If I fail, protect Clara. She's all I have left." His fingers trembled over the keys. Then he deleted the sentence and replaced it with, "Tomorrow we win." At dawn, Clara stirred awake and found Alexander still at the desk, his eyes bloodshot from exhaustion, but his face steady. She walked over, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "You don't have to bear this alone anymore," she whispered. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I'll be right here with you." Alexander turned, his eyes softening as he pressed a kiss to her forehead. "I know. And that's the only strength I need." In that moment, they were no longer a legendary CEO and a runaway bride. They were simply a man and a woman, holding tightly to each other before the storm. Dawn broke, and the city sky hung gray, as if warning of an uneasy day ahead. Heavy clouds blocked the sun, casting everything in a somber haze. Clara stood by the window, her hand gripping the curtain's edge, her heart pounding in chaotic rhythm. Alexander was getting ready, every movement sharp, decisive, without hesitation, tightening his tie, buttoning his shirt, stacking the thick file of documents. He wasn't preparing for just a meeting, but for the final battle, where every truth would be exposed and the enemy would have no way out. Clara turned, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'm going with you." Alexander paused, his deep gaze locking on hers. "Clara, I don't want you in danger. We've come this far. I won't leave you to face this alone." She stepped closer, clasping his hand, her eyes burning with fire. "If this is the end, I want to be by your side." He hesitated, then nodded slightly. "All right, but promise me, whatever happens, you must live." The battle took place in the grand hall of a luxury hotel, where Ryan and Damien had arranged a new signing ceremony with another partner. Hundreds of reporters crowded in, cameras flashing toward the stage. Clara entered alongside Alexander, whispers rippling through the crowd. Their names once again filled the spotlight. The runaway bride and the CEO, back from the dead. On stage, Damien wore his cold facade. A thin smile stretched across his lips, though sweat glistened at his temple. Beside him, Ryan appeared in a crisp suit, his eyes sharp and predatory. Spotting Alexander, he smirked. "So you finally came. I knew you wouldn't miss your own farewell." Alexander strode forward calmly, placing the file on the long table. "Yes, I came to end this, before the entire business world." He opened the folder, projecting slide after slide, fresh evidence of Ryan and Damien manipulating investment funds, creating shell companies to launder money. Images, emails, and witness testimony appeared on the giant screen. The hall erupted, shareholders and partners whispering in fear. Damien forced a smirk, struggling to hold composure. "All fabricated. He staged this to destroy me." Alexander's eyes cut into him. "Really? Then what about this recording?" The speakers blared with Damien and Ryan's voices, plotting together, mocking Clara as a pawn, laughing about forcing Alexander out so they could finish him. All eyes turned to the two men. Damien's face drained pale, while Ryan simply smirked, unrepentant. "Impressive," Ryan sneered, clapping slowly. "You know how to play, Alexander. But you forgot one thing. Business doesn't end with paper. It ends with blood." In an instant, one of Ryan's men lunged, pulling a knife from under his jacket, charging straight at Clara. Screams rang out, chaos erupting. Alexander reacted like lightning. He threw himself in front of Clara, spun, and struck with a precise punch that sent the attacker crashing to the ground. The knife clattered across the floor. Ryan's laugh rang out, savage and unhinged. "You never change, always throwing yourself in harm's way for others. And that will be your death." He suddenly pulled a pistol from his jacket, raising it toward Alexander. The air froze. Clara screamed, "No!" Alexander stood tall, his eyes like ice. "If you're going to kill me, Then do it here in front of everyone. Let the world see exactly what you are. Flashes erupted. Hundreds of cameras turned on Ryan. In that split second, he faltered, not from conscience, but from the knowledge that one pull of the trigger would forever brand him in the world's eyes. The hesitation sealed his fate. Security forces stormed in, slamming him to the ground, the gun skidding away. Damien was seized too, his face white, sweat pouring down like rain. Handcuffed, Ryan still screamed across the hall, "Alexander! You think you've won? I'd rather die than lose to you." Alexander looked down at him, eyes like steel. "No, Ryan. You'll live. You'll live so the world can see just how pathetic you are. That is your punishment." Ryan roared, but his voice was drowned by the uproar of reporters and the furious clamor of the press. Damien was dragged away, his eyes still spitting fire, but his legs shaking. He was no longer the golden heir, only a disgraced accomplice in an international scandal. When the hall finally settled, Alexander turned to Clara. She was trembling, tears streaking her cheeks. He stepped forward, pulling her tightly into his arms, whispering, "I told you, I'd rather be exposed than lose you." Clara sobbed, clutching him fiercely. In his arms, the fear slowly dissolved. Outside, the press shouted his name, questions flying. But Alexander no longer cared. The world could spin in chaos, but in his heart, only one truth mattered. Clara was here, safe, and he would never let go again. Weeks after the fateful battle, the city gradually returned to peace. The media stopped reporting on Ryan and Damien. Those two names had sunk into the swamp of legal scandals, no longer admired by anyone. The noise of the press shifted to a new subject, the legendary return of Alexander Cole. Cole Enterprises not only stood firm, but even grew spectacularly. Shareholders called him the man reborn from ashes. But for Alexander, titles, profits, and praise no longer mattered. What he most wanted to hold on to was not the company, but the woman who had held his hand through the storm. One afternoon, Alexander drove Clara to the outskirts of the city, to a green hill by a lake. The wind rustled through the willows, carrying the scent of damp earth and fresh grass. A newly built wooden house appeared, its red roof bright, its wide windows open to the light. Clara gasped. What is this?" Alexander stopped the car, stepped out, and held out his hand. "A home. The home I want to build with you. Not a place of exile, not a cold castle, a true haven." Clara's hand trembled as she took his, tears welling in her eyes. She stepped inside. A warm little kitchen, a bright living room, a balcony facing the lake. Everything was simple, but it carried a promise of a new life. As they sat on the porch steps, the sunset painted the lake in fiery orange. Alexander stayed quiet for a long time, then turned, his gaze deep. "Clara, I once lost everything because I trusted the wrong people. I once thought I wasn't worthy of loving anyone or capable of protecting anyone. But you changed me." Clara bit her lip, her eyes brimming. Alexander gently took her hand, his voice trembling yet resolute. "I love you, Clara. Not because you walked beside me, but because of who you are. Strong, stubborn, brave enough to stand tall. You gave me a reason to come back, and I want to spend the rest of my life by your side." Clara broke down, burying her face against his shoulder. "I love you too, Alexander. I've been so afraid, but every time you stood in front of me, I knew my heart already belonged to you. I don't want to leave anymore. Never again." They held each other tightly, the wind sweeping over the hill, as if etching their silent vow into the air. The next day they moved into the little house together. Clara placed fresh flowers in a vase in the kitchen, while Alexander hammered bookshelves into the living room. Simple tasks, ordinary in anyone else's eyes, filled them with laughter and joy. Sometimes Clara would drop dishes or overwater the plants. Alexander would frown, but his eyes always betrayed tenderness. And when he buried himself in work, Clara would quietly set a cup of coffee by his side, whispering, "Don't forget to rest." They began to learn how to slow down, to savor each day. No more flashing cameras, no more cruel rumors. Only birdsong each morning and the wind's embrace at nightfall. One evening, under a sky full of stars, Alexander took Clara's hand and led her to the lake. He stopped, pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a platinum ring, simple but gleaming. I can't promise you a perfect life, but I promise you a life with me, with all my love and protection. Clara Bennett, will you marry me? Clara froze, tears spilling. She nodded hard, her voice breaking. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close, kissing her beneath the grandeur of the universe. The breeze carried the scent of lake water and wildflowers, bearing witness to their eternal vow. From afar, wind chimes on the porch rang gently, like a soft lullaby. Clara rested her head against Alexander's chest, smiling through tears. I once thought I was only a pawn, a tool. But with you, I know I am loved, cherished. Thank you, Alexander. He held her tighter, whispering back, No, Clara. I'm the one who should thank you, because you helped me find myself again. In that moment, all the pain of the past dissolved, leaving only the sweetness of the present and the hope of a future together. The Bennett mansion, once a symbol of prestige, now stood in silence. After Damien and Ryan were exposed on the corporate stage, the Bennett family could not escape scrutiny either. Debt and disgrace closed in, and the connections that once thrived under the Whitmore family's influence turned their backs. Richard Bennett, Clara's father, sat quietly in the vast living room, a glass of liquor in hand, though the taste no longer gave him comfort. He looked around. The paintings, the luxurious furniture, all of it had lost meaning. We've lost everything, he whispered. Across from him, Margaret, Clara's mother, sat with weariness etched into her once elegant face. She clutched her pearl necklace, eyes brimming with tears. It's not that we lost everything, her voice broke. It's that we lost our daughter. From the day we forced her into that marriage, I saw the pain in her eyes, but I stayed silent. I am guilty too. Richard closed his eyes. The image of Clara in her wedding dress, her face pale, appeared vividly in his mind. Then the memory of her running out into the rain, leaving everything behind. He knew he had driven her to that moment. After the scandal, the Bennetts were compelled to sell a significant portion of their estate to settle their debts. The lavish parties disappeared, and powerful friends dwindled. In the sprawling mansion, only the aging couple remained, moving through endless quiet days. Richard gave up drinking, instead spending his evenings silently reading the papers. Margaret began tending a garden, planting roses, Clara's childhood favorite. Each time she bent over the soil, her heart tightened. If only I had listened to her more back then. One afternoon, when news spread that Clara and Alexander had opened a bookstore cafe, Margaret went quietly to see for herself. From a distance, she saw her daughter laughing, her hair dancing in the breeze as she carried trays of coffee to customers. Beside her stood Alexander, watching her with tender eyes. Margaret broke down in tears. For the first time, she saw Clara truly happy, without the Bennett name, without Whitmore's prestige. A few days later, Clara received a letter. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Clara, we were wrong. Wrong for turning you into a tool, wrong for believing status mattered more than your heart. We've lost everything, but our deepest regret is that we lost you first. If one day you are willing, please give us a chance to see your smile again. Up close. No matter what, we will always love you. Mother and father. Tears fell as Clara read. She remembered the days of coercion, of being trapped, but now there was no hatred in her heart, only sorrow mixed with compassion. She told Alexander, I won't ever return to live in that house. But maybe I can forgive them. Not for their sake, but for mine. Forgiveness will set me free. Alexander gently squeezed her hand, his gaze warm and tender. In the end, Richard and Margaret sold off what remained and moved to a small countryside house. They lived quietly, far from the noise, spending their days gardening, attending church, and hoping for the day their daughter might visit. That autumn, Clara and Alexander truly came. Few words were spoken. They simply sat around a modest dinner table and shared a meal. For the first time in years, laughter filled the little house. Not the hollow echoes of wealth or power, but real, unguarded joy. Clara looked at her aging parents, and a whisper rose in her heart. At last, we have all found peace in our own way. And I I finally have a real family. Spring returned, and the trees along the streets sprouted fresh green shoots. The bustling city kept racing along its endless rhythm, but in a quiet corner, Alexander and Clara had found their own path. After all the storms, Alexander chose not to return to his powerful CEO seat. He turned down offers from major corporations, shaking his head at opportunities that could have placed him once again at the summit of power. "I've already had all of that, and I lost it all too," he told Clara one afternoon. "Now I no longer crave power. I just want a life of freedom, to work the way I believe in, and to see you smile every day." So Alexander opened a small firm specializing in consulting and supporting startups. His office wasn't in a glittering skyscraper, but in a cozy room by the lake, where sunlight streamed in through wide windows. There he could choose his clients, refuse dirty dealings, and, most importantly, work with the honesty he had once lost. As for Clara, she finally fulfilled the dreams she'd cherished since childhood. Opening a book cafe, the little shop sat on a street corner with white-painted wooden windows and bougainvillea vines cascading over the porch. Inside, the aroma of coffee blended with the scent of new pages, and warm wooden tables filled the space. On the walls hung paintings that Clara had handpicked herself. She named it Horizon. To her, it was the place where a new future began. On opening day, Alexander stood behind the bar, wearing the apron Clara had given him, and awkwardly made his first cappuccino. Guests laughed at the clumsiness of the legendary businessman turned reluctant barista. Clara stood beside him, watching his furrowed brow with a radiant smile. "You're terrible at this," she teased. He arched an eyebrow. "I'm only good at one thing, keeping you by my side." The whole cafe laughed and Clara blushed, her heart warming in a way she'd never felt before. Time passed, and they settled into their new rhythm. In the mornings, Alexander stopped by Clara's cafe, sitting by the window with a newspaper, sometimes helping carry drinks to customers. In the afternoons, Clara brought coffee to his lakeside office, sitting quietly with a book while he discussed ideas with young entrepreneurs. They no longer lived under fear or blinding flashes. Instead, they learned to enjoy the simplest things: shopping together on weekends, repainting the cafe walls, planting flowers in little pots on the porch. Clara often sat in her cafe's corner, watching Alexander hammer shelves for her customers, her heart swelling with quiet joy. She knew this was the life she'd longed for. Not extravagance, but true love, built together, piece by piece. One evening after closing the cafe, Clara and Alexander sat on the porch, warm cups of coffee in their hands. The night was still, broken only by the faint hum of traffic and the glow of street lamps. "Do you regret it?" Clara asked softly. "Leaving the peak behind for this small life?" Alexander turned, his eyes clear in the dark. "No, I once stood at the top, but I was loneliest there. Now I have you, and I have a real life. That's the greatest victory." Clara smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Me too. I was once treated like a pawn, forced to carry burdens that weren't mine. But now I get to live my dream with the man I love. That's freedom." They sat in silence, hearts speaking louder than words. Days passed. Horizon became a beloved spot for book and coffee lovers, while Alexander's firm grew into fertile ground for new ideas. They didn't need headlines or flashy titles. Their joy came from the grateful eyes of clients, from the smiles of young dreamers finding their path, from mornings that began together and nights ending with, "I love you." One sunny afternoon, Alexander and Clara sat together on the cafe porch. He took her hand, looked straight into her eyes, his voice steady. "We've weathered the storm. Now I want to write the rest of our story in peace. A new beginning, and I want to walk it to the very end with you." Clara squeezed his hand, whispering, "Yes, a new beginning. Ours." Golden sunlight wrapped around them, as if blessing the life just opening before them. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, gilding the small kitchen in golden warmth. Clara stood by the stove, stirring a pot of bubbling soup, its aroma filling the wooden house by the lake. Alexander came down the stairs, his hair slightly tousled, carrying the unhurried air of a man just waking up. Wearing a light sweater, he smiled as soon as he saw Clara. "My mornings have never tasted this good since the day you came into my life," he said, his deep, husky voice filled with affection. Clara turned, smiling softly. That's only because you used to live off instant noodles. Alexander raised a brow, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, whispering, Well, now I've got my own private chef. Clara pushed him away lightly, her cheeks flushed. Yet inside, warmth spread through her heart. Day by day, she realized more clearly, happiness wasn't lavish banquets or jewels, but simple moments like this. Cooking together, laughing together in the kitchen with the man she loved. After all the storms, Alexander and Clara had chosen to live slowly. No more rushing into tense board meetings, no more facing the harsh glare of the press. Each day, Alexander worked at his small lakeside office, occasionally advising promising startups. He no longer cared for the top seat of power. What mattered now was giving his time to their home. Clara was busy with her book cafe, Horizon. She personally picked out each new title, arranged cozy reading corners for customers, and every late afternoon, she would make Alexander a latte and carry it over to his office. The sight became so familiar that locals began to call them the couple of Horizon Lake. On their days off, they tended their little garden together. Clara planted climbing roses, while Alexander built wooden trellises for them to grow. Once, she accidentally spilled soil all over his shirt, and the two laughed so hard while cleaning up that tears streamed down their faces. They began taking small trips, never extravagant, just to places of peace. One weekend, they drove to the Vermont mountains, staying in a wooden cabin. They watched the sunrise in the mornings and lit bonfires at night. Clara tried roasting marshmallows for the first time, burning them to a crisp. Alexander still took a bite and nodded seriously. Best I've ever had. Sometimes they went to the sea, renting a small boat to drift silently over the waves. Clara sat by the rail, hair flying in the wind, while Alexander watched her, his heart swelling with a serenity he hadn't felt in years. Each trip became a memory, not immortalized in headlines, but in little stories only they shared, and that made them priceless. One evening after Horizon had closed, Clara sat by the window, holding her old diary. Ink stains remained from the day she fled her wedding, running through the rain with a shattered heart. She smiled faintly, tears rolling down her cheeks, tears no longer bitter. Back then, I was just a runaway bride, Clara whispered to herself, but now I'm a free woman. I live by my choices, and I love with my heart. Alexander came up behind her, wrapping her in his arms. You're not just free, Clara. You're the heart of this family. Clara turned to meet his deep gaze, her chest overflowing with love. One Sunday morning, they cooked breakfast together on the porch. Alexander frying eggs, Clara flipping pancakes, a vase of wildflowers on the table. They ate while listening to birdsong, the lake mirroring the blue sky. Clara propped her chin on her hand, gazing at him. I used to think family was just a burden, something I was married off into, a debt to be paid. But now I understand. Family is where your heart belongs, where you can laugh without fear. Alexander gently took her hand. And that's all I ever wanted for you. Not a castle, not a throne, just a home. Clara smiled, feeling happiness pulse through her veins. That afternoon, they sat together on the porch swing. Clara rested her head on Alexander's shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the sky crimson. No more painful past, no more predators lurking in the shadows. Clara whispered softly, At last, I found my true family. Alexander kissed the top of her head, replying, And I'll protect it until the very end. The last rays of sunlight wrapped around them, like a blessing for a love that had endured the storm and finally blossomed in peace. A year had passed since Alexander and Clara chose to begin a new life together. The Horizon Book Cafe had become a familiar haven for literature lovers, while Alexander's small firm thrived steadily under the motto, integrity and transparency. They lived simply, yet their days overflowed with love, as if all the storms of the past were nothing more than a distant dream. And today, with spring returning once again, they stood on the brink of a special day, their wedding day. Not a lavish, forced marriage, not a ceremony bound by power and interests, but a small, warm wedding held in the lakeside garden, the place where they had found peace. That morning, Clara stood before the mirror in the small room by the garden, Her pristine white gown embraced her slender frame, her hair loosely pinned with a few wildflowers. No glittering crown, no expensive jewelry, only the purest simplicity. Her mother, Margaret, walked in. Her eyes were red but lit with joy. "You look beautiful, Clara." Clara smiled, her voice thick with emotion. "This time, you don't have to worry about me running away." They both laughed through tears. Richard, her father, appeared in the doorway, then stepped forward slowly. He handed his daughter a bouquet of white roses, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry for once pushing you down the wrong path. Today, I just want to hold your hand and give you to the man you truly love." Clara nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. The garden was decorated with garlands of wildflowers, wooden tables covered with white cloth, and lanterns strung high above. There were no hundreds of guests, only family, close friends, a few cherished patrons from Horizon, and colleagues from Alexander's small firm. The atmosphere was intimate, warm, filled with live music that drifted through the air. Alexander stood at the end of the aisle in a navy blue suit, his eyes glowing as he saw Clara. The rest of the world disappeared. There was only her, in white, walking toward him. Clara held on to her father's arm, stepping along the grass aisle strewn with petals. The wind blew gently, and golden sunlight streamed through the leaves. It felt as though a halo of light wrapped around her. When she reached him, she handed the bouquet to her mother, then slowly stepped into Alexander's waiting arms. "You're here," he whispered, his eyes trembling. "And this time, I'm here to stay," Clara replied, her smile radiant. The officiant smiled, his voice solemn yet warm. "Today we do not witness a union bound by power, but the joining of two hearts that endured the storm to finally find each other." Alexander looked into Clara's eyes, his voice steady and strong. "Clara, I once lost everything. I once believed I didn't deserve love, that I couldn't protect anyone. But you came, not to save me, but to remind me that this heart could still love. I vow never to let you cry in loneliness again. I will build our home with you, every day, step by step." Clara's tears fell as her trembling hand gripped his tighter. "Alexander, I was once treated as a tool, forced into chains, stripped of my freedom. But you showed me that true love is not a shackle, it is wings. I vow to hold your hand, through peace or through storm, and to make our home the place you will always long to return to." Applause broke out, mingled with soft sobs of emotion. The officiant smiled. "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Alexander, you may kiss your bride." Alexander gently lifted Clara's chin, pressing a kiss to her lips, tender yet burning, as if it carried all the weight of everything they had endured. Cheers erupted as petals rained down across the garden. In his arms, Clara smiled through tears that glistened. This time, she was no runaway bride, no desperate figure fleeing through the rain. She was a free woman, walking into the aisle by her own choice, choosing love with her whole heart. The reception unfolded beneath lantern light and lively music. Guests danced, laughed, and celebrated. Clara's parents sat quietly in a corner, watching their daughter's happiness, their lips curved in bitter-sweet relief after years of mistakes. Alexander and Clara held hands as they danced together in the circle of friends. The breeze was cool, the moonlight bright, and in their eyes there was only one thing, their shared future. Clara leaned her head on her husband's shoulder and whispered, "I've found my true family, Alexander. And today I became your wife." He pulled her closer, murmuring, "I swear this is only the beginning of a happiness with no end."